Nieves, Freddy the Devil.
Hello and welcome to the Never Heard of It podcast. I'm Craig Moorhead, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and co-conspirator.
I assume you're talking about me, Sean Harwell. Welcome, everyone. This is the podcast where we talk about the movies that have fallen through our cracks. And we have an extra crack with us today who we'll get to in a second. But first, why don't you come find us online? We're at neverheardpodcast.com. You can find links to all our social sites there, but we're on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, etc. And always, you can listen on iTunes, subscribe, and everywhere you get podcasts. Reviews are nice, but not necessary.
Subscriptions are nice too. How you doing today, Sean?
I'm feeling pretty Irish today, Craig. How about you?
I am. I'm feeling my blarney.
Yes. It's not even St. Patrick's Day. Isn't that weird? Yeah.
No, not at all. All right, now that we've been as casually racist toward the Irish as possible, let's just jump into it. So today our guest is Jason Barker, an exhibitionist from the Chapel Hill area. Jason, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Yeah, I don't see how it could possibly be misconstrued as anything else.
Yeah, clearly Jason works for a movie theater.
Yeah, that's right. Movie, motion picture exhibition.
I feel like that was very clear.
If your mind's in the gutter. Jason, Sean and I both went to school with you. I don't know if you went to school with us. How has your life changed since that time?
It has changed plenty. Thank you for asking.
Now, that's one sentence is fine. One sentence is fine. Now let's get down into the nitty-gritty details.
Okay. Please, let's do that.
Sorry. Yeah, so Jason, you're in the motion picture exhibition business right now, day to day. Movies, how long have they been a driving force in your life, and how did they become so?
I'd say that they've been a driving force in my life since I was very, very young. Since I first watched them. I think I first saw Pete's Dragon in the theater. That was one of my first movies ever.
Nice.
And they've really played a large part in my life ever since then.
So that's kind of the movie that kicked it all off for you.
This is the original Pete's Dragon, not the one that came out last year.
Oh, okay. So
it's been much longer than
young at all.
I'm wondering if there was a certain point in your life, Jason, where you realized, I probably like these things a little more than the next guy, maybe even to an unhealthy degree. Pete's Dragon is one thing, but I know you. I know you're a musical fan. I know you love like Sam Raimi. I remember from film school specifically. When did you sort of like become aware of maybe some stuff that was a little off the the beaten path as far as film is concerned?
Probably in middle school when everybody was spending their time reading comics and doing productive things, and I was making home video movies with my best friend.
Nice.
Yeah.
Describe one of those movies.
Thank you. Yes.
In detail.
Well, we would do Indiana Jones stunt spectaculars.
Yes.
We would make a dummy out of my best friend Ed and do horrible things out of it. It was not hard. And we basically would film us doing horrible, sadistic things to this dummy, pretending it was Ed. Now, this is probably making me sound a lot more sociopathic than I really want to, but
I would say any of the videos I made with my friends, it generally involved people getting like pitchforks in them and stuff. So yeah it doesn't sound unusual.
If there wasn't fire involved, it really wasn't worthwhile.
Sure. Now, would you describe yourself as more of like an action-y guy at that stage in your life? I mean, I'm assuming obviously you were watching Indiana Jones, maybe some of the, Amblin stuff, Goonies. I know you're a Carpenter fan, so Big Trouble in Little China was probably in the VHS deck at some point. Is there a horror element at that young age as well? Because I know Craig obviously is like was watching these things out of the cradle. What about you?
Yeah. I really didn't get into horror as much until I was around 15 and someone showed me Army of Darkness for the first time.
Yeah.
And that was really a turning point for me.
What about that movie specific? I mean, like when you watch it now, obviously you watch it probably through a different filter than you did when you're 15. But can you describe what it was at age 15 that movie did for you, and then maybe now what you appreciate it, having learned about the filmmaking side of it?
Well, it's interesting because at the age of 15, I had a stroke that put me in the hospital. I went from being an AB student to a CD student overnight as a result. The left side of my body was paralyzed for about a week. And while I was in the hospital, a good friend of mine's father gave me a big stack of videos, half of which were porn.
Seriously?
Absolutely seriously.
Were you I don't have to have a stroke for you to give me porn. You could have just given me porn.
Why were you waiting for this?
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah.
Too little, too late, obviously.
Oh, man.
The other half of which was Army of Darkness and Evil Dead 2.
Nice.
So I remember I was in the hospital recovering. At this point, I had gotten most of the feeling back in my left side, but they were still a significant amount of nerve damage. And I was watching Evil Dead, and I remember the first time I watched that, I was just kind of confused because it was so low budget. It was, the effects this is 1992, 93, so the effects were pretty cruddy, but
sure.
I mean, it was just gore on top of gore, but it was entertaining. I watched the second one and realized about halfway through, oh, this is meant to be over the top and insane.
Right.
And then I watched Army of Darkness, which is pretty much dark comedy from beginning to end. And I felt like I got it. And it was at that point I felt, I don't know, there's something about horror became kind of comforting at that point. Just because, maybe it was because I had nearly died. I don't know.
You take pleasure in watching other people die. Yeah.
Where did you go from Army of Darkness?
From Army of Darkness, I'd already been a fan of Big Trouble Little China at that point, which you can't really call a horror movie, but that did open the door to other John Carpenter masterpieces like The Thing, and Poltergeist had always been a very strong... To this day, I think Poltergeist is the scariest movie I've ever seen.
Agreed.
I was going to say, Craig will be handing you a trophy.
We can...
And it's rated PG, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It just is one of the creepiest, spookiest, off-the-wall, scariest movies. I mean, as a child, you cannot get scarier than that movie. It'll scar you for life.
Yeah, and it did.
Yeah, and it did. And actually, I remember not long after Army of Darkness and the stroke and all that, I watched for the first time ever The Shining at home.
Oh, yeah.
Just on a small 12-inch screen, color screen. And that was an incredibly scary experience to watch that alone at night.
Yeah.
It just has this feeling of unease from beginning to end that never really lets you relax.
You really don't know how it's working on you until, you get to the end and you just realize, sort of how disoriented you are and all that. Let me back up for 1 second. You said a 12-inch color screen. Paint a picture for me. What are we talking about?
This was a television that was in our, I guess you would call it a living room, a breakfast nook.
Oh, okay.
It was a room attached to the kitchen.
Like on the counter TV kind of thing?
Basically. Yeah. It was just me watching this movie. It came on TV, so it was probably edited even. Yeah. It kind of destroyed me psychologically.
Nice. And how did the porn look on the 12-inch screen?
Not bad. Not bad.
Okay, good to know. Here's a question for you, because this is something that I think about every now and then. As far as my own tastes go, we met each other in '95. The first year of film school. I, from that point kind of forward, thought of you mostly as a comedy guy, like as far as the own stuff that that you were writing, comedies, and then obviously you wrote this great musical short film while we were in school. Am I wrong about that? Because I'm sitting here thinking like well, when I went to film school I was like a big Tim Burton guy like that, and like David Lynch a little bit, but and then none of that's reflected in anything I've done really. Let's start film school then. Like where were your tastes coming into that? And then as far as like your own, like obviously you did some writing and directing while we were there. Like how did that develop? And where did the horror go? Because I don't remember. Did you ever make a horror? Or
I never
once,
anything with the exception of once writing something with Craig. I never once wrote or made any kind of horror. Okay. You're absolutely right. I was definitely more of a comedy and definitely a musical oriented kind of guy, which I was ever since I watched The Little Mermaid when that came out in '89.
How could you not be charmed by The Little Mermaid?
True. Actually, it started in like 91 when my mother took me to see Man of La Mancha on stage. And that really started my complete and utter love affair with pretty much all things musical. And so I really kind of fell in love with musicals at that point. I mainlined them all the time. One of my favorites of all time was Little Shop of Horrors, which kind of melds both things together when you come to think about it.
Yes, yep.
But yeah, I definitely appreciated what went into making a musical far more than most other types of movies.
Well, and I will say, like, yeah, if you're listening to this and going to film school, that is one way to stand out in film school. It was like, yeah, Jason's the musical guy. Like, you really were, And, like, I suspect maybe there's a bit more mainstream acceptance of that, or maybe there's young people going into school now that, they saw Moulin Rouge when they were 12 or something like that.
Well, they've lived through the Glee years and, like, everything is
exactly. Yeah, or even, like, American Idol and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It was definitely a lot less mainstream at the time. There hadn't been a successful movie musical in quite some time. I think Little Shop of Horrors was literally the last live action mainstream musical that had come out at that point.
Well, I should ask this before I forget it. Have you seen La La Land?
I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I thought it melded a lot of classic Golden Age Hollywood musical elements with some new stuff, which I really appreciated.
City of stars, are you shining just for me? City of stars, there's so much that I can't see.
Let's transition then a little bit to what you're doing now, and you can give us your title, but you're at the Lumina Theater in Chapel Hill. I've looked at pictures online on the site. I know you guys have an Instagram page and all that stuff, and we'll put links up to that. This is an independently owned theater, maybe at a time where I feel like I'm seeing those come back a little bit, or the ones that are still out there are fighting and doing really cool stuff. I know you guys do like an outdoor series, and I'd love to hear about that. How did you end up there? And then, what is your title or just some of your duties?
I am the manager at the Lumina. I ended up there about 8 years ago now. I answered an ad on Craigslist for a manager of a small theater. I'd always really wanted to open up one of my own movie theaters.
God, wouldn't that be the best?
Yeah. Which I think would be amazing. And this seemed like the next best thing. I kind of immediately fell in love with it because it was small, 5 screens, independently owned, so there's no corporate sterility, which a lot of movie theaters tend to have. I don't know, I just kind of fell in love with it, and I've been with it ever since.
What do you think makes that theater, and if it's not just yours specifically, but makes an independent theater different from, the Regal 25 screen with the RPX $15 tickets and all that stuff? I mean, especially right now where, you can kind of predict what movies are or what type of movie is going to do well. It's the big spectacle comic book thing, it's Star Wars, it's these big franchises. And I don't know, are you finding that people are fine to go to these independent theaters as long as you have those movies? Or, how do you guys distinguish yourself, basically?
It definitely depends on the person. Yeah. I think when you go to a movie theater, you bring what you want to get out of it with you when you get there. Different people expect different experiences when they go to a movie theater. The way that we tend to stand out is we offer a smaller service, but it is more personable. A lot of our staff are very knowledgeable. We have this one gentleman that works for us who is one of my favorite people I've ever met. His name is Michael Minogue. He is our ticketeer and theater cleaner, and he is the most enthusiastic person I've ever met when it comes to movies.
That's awesome.
If we're showing Star Wars, he'll make sure he greets everyone with "May the Force be with you." He'll dress up. He helps get people in the mode before they even get into the theater, which I think is very important.
That's maybe something I've never even thought about, but I think you're absolutely right. Like, I would love to walk into a theater and not just feel that dread of, I got to go through this line and get all this crap done so I can get into the theater and get a good seat and then sit through 15 minutes of commercials and all that stuff. But
well, yeah, and that's the thing too. Like around where I am, And really where I grew up, for the most part, it's like there are very few theaters that seem to be excited at all about movies. There was one place I remember when I was a kid, when Goonies came out, and they basically built the hallway that you would walk down to get into the theater was built out like a cave.
That's awesome.
So the further you walk down, it's like you're walking into this cave, and it's just like, man, how great is that? You just generally don't see anything cool like that anymore. And that brings me to this question. So how do you decide what to book?
Well, I wish I were the one that decides what to book.
Okay.
We actually have a booking agent that handles a lot of our bookings,
Right.
Okay.
which in turn is based on what our demographics are, what movies tend to do well at our theater,
Sure.
and so on. Like, for instance, horror movies
Yeah.
die at our theater.
Really?
They never do well. Not even at Halloween time. We have a lot of elderly folks and families that come to our theater specifically. And horror movies just tend not to do well. R-rated comedies don't do well at our theater as well. With the exception of Role Models. Role Models killed it at our theater.
Of course.
Wow.
Yeah,
All right.
Craig and I have talked about, how strong the elderly demographic, elderly, but in 60 and over demographic is
That's fair.
as far as moviegoers. Anything specifically from last year? Like, did you guys get Allied, the Zemeckis movie?
We did.
And how did that do?
It did okay.
Yeah.
It didn't do great. Like, Girl on the Train did really, really well.
Okay.
Florence Foster Jenkins killed it at our theater. I mean, absolutely. It was there for a good month and a half strong. The senior demographic I found really, they're strong moviegoers during the week.
Uh-huh.
Matinee moviegoers. They're steady is what they are. They're not overwhelming in numbers, but they're steady numbers. And they're loyal. They're super loyal.
Yes.
They find one place, they will return to that place over and over and over again as long as they're accommodating.
And what about the outdoor stuff? Do you get to program any of that? Because I remember, I know you guys did Back to the Future, right?
We did. As a rule, they are second run movies. Like last year, we started the season, which starts in May, with The Force Awakens.
Oh, nice. Okay, so something still pretty recent, though, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was a strong shower at the theater, and we felt that would be a fun thing to watch under the stars, and we weren't wrong. It did very, very well. But we also started 2 years ago shuffling in older movies. Like you mentioned, we did Back to the Future, and that was that was to this day the strongest showing we've had outdoors.
Awesome.
We had a DeLorean, we had a costume contest, we did the whole thing.
That's awesome.
It was a really fun experience.
That's great.
And the thing is, there are so many children that haven't even seen that movie, aren't even aware of that movie. And to see it on the big screen with a crowded audience, all laughing at the right places and cheering at the right places, it enhances the effect of the movie, and it makes it memorable.
Yeah, definitely. And I would think, too, with kids, I would much rather and be, I think, more patient and accepting of watching a movie with a bunch of kids behind me if it's outside, as opposed to when I saw Rogue One and there's, just entire conversations going on right behind me in the theater, and their parents don't really care. When I get it, because I got a kid too, but, outside it's it's a free-for-all. Yes, you can make a little bit of noise, check your phone, I don't care. Mm-hmm. I am kind of curious as well, as far as trends and stuff that's changed, I think especially since Netflix. Are you guys doing 3D? Are you moving to laser projectors? I know one of the theaters here, they just swapped out all the seats in a couple of the theaters, and they're doing reclinable seats, which seem really nice. They've got a couple rooms that have love seats and little sofas and different things like that. Do you guys get into any of that, or what's your take on some of that stuff?
Yeah, we do absolutely none of that.
Good.
We do not do 3D at all. I have a personal mantra when it comes to 3D, and that's basically the only movies that should ever be in 3D are really great animation or really, really crappy horror.
So no James Cameron.
I saw Avatar. I thought it was an okay movie, mediocre script, beautiful to look at.
Yeah, exactly. It was a fun experience in 3D.
And in 3D it was amazing, but it was 2.5 hours of 3D. It's just a migraine waiting to happen.
Yeah,
it's a lot to ask. I mean, I give him credit. He created camera systems that defined the film industry. Nothing's been made to its equal at this point from a technical standpoint. But from the standpoint of an audience member, it's asking a lot, really, when you think about it.
Does your audience ever come up to you guys and, are you guys getting this in 3D? I mean, do they ask that at all?
Yeah.
Do they? Okay.
But a lot of times, the people that ask that are the people that are making sure we're not getting it in 3D because they can't stand to watch it in 3D.
Yeah.
I think we're getting
like
out
it's
of a
passing.
phase. Yeah, I think it's passing. I feel like for a time there, absolutely everything was in 3D, and the problem was it wasn't true 3D. It was like a two-dimensional image closer to you in perspective than another two-dimensional image that was farther away from you.
Right.
I mean, as opposed to a movie being shot in for 3D, it just became everything's being converted to 3D so they could jack ticket prices up.
Yeah.
And, I mean, people can sense a scam, and that's just a scam.
Yeah.
As far as the reclining seats, I actually had the experience to go to a theater that had fully reclining seats. They had each seat had its own little tray, and you could order food, and you could lean all the way back and lay back and put your feet up. It was very comfortable. Mm-hmm. The problem I had with it was that it really is isolating. It doesn't feel like you're in a movie theater at all. It feels like you're in your living room, which a lot of people want to feel. Mm-hmm. But to me, the theater-going experience is not just the movie that's being projected. It's being part of the crowd experiencing this film for the first time. It's being part of the laughter and part of the fear and part of the anxiety and part of all of you being transported to one place at one time together. It's a group effort.
Yeah.
And when it becomes you alone, it's not as much fun. I mean, who wants to go to a movie theater if they're the only one in the theater?
Fair enough.
Me.
Oh.
Well, besides Sean, of course.
Yes. I got a lot of business to take care of by myself. No, just kidding. I don't mind going by myself, but it is weird when there's only like 3 people in there. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, it feels a little more illicit than it should be. Now, let me ask this. It looks like here online, Jake Kunkel 2 months ago left a review of the Lumina Theater.
God, are you on Yelp, Craig? What's going on?
This is Google.
Okay.
Now, he gave it 4 stars, so clearly he's a level-headed gentleman. But he seems to take issue with the 50-cent refills on popcorn. Now, what would you tell Jake about those 50-cent refills, Jason?
What would I tell Jake? Well, I would tell Jake, first of all, if he was not aware, the only way a movie theater makes money is through its concessions.
Yep.
All of your ticket sales go back to the distributor, or at least a very, very, very high percentage. Mm-hmm. The only profit a movie theater takes in are through the concessions, which is why concessions tend to be, in some people's opinions, overpriced.
Sure.
50-cent refills, honestly, is not that strange a thing. Some movie theaters will offer free refills for like the first refill of something, or unlimited free refill sodas, and I definitely can see the appeal for that for sure. Yeah. Personally, I would prefer to go that way as well. So I'm right there with you, Jay Kunkel.
Sure.
No. I'm gonna make an opposite point.
Oh, okay.
What's this guy? What was his name, Craig?
It seems to be Jake Kunkel.
Jake.
Yeah. Jake Kunkel. Yeah.
Hear me out. Maybe for your body's sake, you don't need a second bag of popcorn on the refill.
I mean, that's
I have
really
never.
point, Sean.
Yes.
Because I have never, ever in my life gotten a refill on popcorn at a movie theater.
And even the small is pretty big now, right?
The small is now at least a medium, pretty much anywhere you go. And the large is just, you can't even see the screen.
Yeah. Also, Jake, every Ace Hardware store that I know of has free popcorn. So after you watch the movie, just go over to Ace and get your damn popcorn and leave the theater alone, okay? They got to make money.
Stay home and eat your popcorn, Jake.
Jesus, Jake.
I can see that you got your work cut out for you there, Jason. Dealing with some of these customers. Although they seem like they're probably good people.
And, to be fair, maybe Jake is, maybe he's like 95 years old. Maybe he was at Florence Foster Jenkins. And, 50 cents was a lot of money back in 1922,
Oh, I see where you're going with that. Yeah.
He didn't take inflation into account, is what I'm saying.
Sure. No, I mean, to him, 50 cents is like, that's a car or something, probably.
Yeah, for sure. But I like this. I'm getting a good kind of perspective of like what the ultimate Jason Barker theater would look like if you had your own. There would be no 3D, free popcorn refills. It sounds like you're on Jake's side, so that's nice.
Sure.
No reclining seats. Would you do old school single screen, or would you do still do a couple screens? Would you do a balcony? What would it look like in the Jason Barker theater
If I had a choice, you really have to have multiple screens if you're going to make any money whatsoever, just so you can have choices of things to see.
Sure.
I would love to have a classic giant one screen with balcony, Mann's Chinese type of deal. Anything to enhance the theater going experience, I think would be important.
And having a Chinese man in the theater would help that.
Having a Chinese man for every seat.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. I think you're right, because it feels like you can just tell some of these theater chains are trying their darndest to compete with the allure of staying at home and watching a million movies that are at your fingertips.
Yeah.
But they're doing so in like gimmicky ways, or not even like fun gimmicky ways. But, you know, it's these little things. And like, that's interesting that you're saying, like, yeah, here I am sitting in a recliner feeling like, this is just kind of like being at home, but not in a good way, you know?
Right.
No, it has to be about like that experience, like that magic that was there in the early days, you know. It's like, how do you get back to that? So
the expense you deal with when you go to these theaters that have the luxury seats, you're looking at ticket prices being jacked up by double or more a lot of times. $15, $16 a ticket during the day, which is crazy. If you have a family, that's just not something you can do on a regular basis at all.
Yeah.
So let me ask this. I imagine, there's a lot of perks about working in a movie theater. One of them has to be that you get to see everything. I feel like you see everything. You know, we keep in contact. That you're always commenting on, I just saw this movie. You know, the night before it's the general release or whatever. Is that the best thing about being at the theater?
In my opinion, that's absolutely the best thing about being in a movie theater.
Yeah.
Because I love watching movies. I love being the first person to have seen something and so on. So absolutely.
And you get your kids in for free?
Yep.
Oh,
That's a positive.
They gotta
as
love
well.
that too. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It is. The bummer is that this particular theater, the Lumina, is about an hour away from my house.
Oh, there you go. Commute.
So
that's the worst. Yeah.
That's the one kind of bummer. But it's cool for the kids. They enjoy having a father that runs a movie theater because they get to brag about seeing Rogue One or whatnot before anybody else. And it's bragging rights, which I can allow them to enjoy for at least another year or two until they're teenagers at least.
You're watching them the day before to like check the run, or you're watching them the day they come out because you're sitting like, I guess, what is the situation in which you're watching the movie for the first time?
It's usually 2 to 3 nights before the movie opens, and it's just to check that there's nothing wrong with the nowadays digital print. I was working there before digital became really a big deal when we were still dealing with 35 millimeter. But yeah, I mean, just make sure the files aren't corrupted so that when we open on Friday, the movies run smoothly. And
has that happened, that files have been corrupted?
Oh, yeah. We've had
like frequently?
Movies that, not frequently, it's very few and far between. But it's not just the files corrupted. We have to assemble various parts. Like we put the ads, we put the trailers on it and stuff. And we have to make sure I didn't goof and put a 3D trailer on there or something. And I didn't put an R-rated trailer on Finding Dory, that kind of thing. And just make sure the cues are in the right place. Make sure the lights come down at the right place. The lights go up in the right place. But occasionally, we'll get a hard drive that's had issues one way or another, and a file won't translate, and we'll just get a black screen.
Jeez.
Wow.
And what do you guys do about like noise complaints or cell phone complaints or any of that kind of stuff? I mean, are you seeing people still texting in movie I mean, does that just happen a lot? Is it like inescapable?
Unfortunately, yes. I don't tolerate it if I'm aware of it. I, of course, can't sit in every theater while it's happening, but if someone complains to me, I will take care of it as quickly as I possibly can. It dilutes the theater-going experience, and that's the most important thing.
That's true. So, and so there's absolutely no 35 millimeter now at the Lumina. Is that what the deal is?
You'd be hard-pressed to find 35 millimeter anywhere, simply because theaters or distribution companies are no longer distributing films in 35 millimeter.
Wow. Yeah.
Anything made or less than 2 years ago will not have a 35 millimeter print anywhere on this earth.
That's very sad.
Did you just cry, Craig?
I haven't. I like the one single tear.
It sounds very like final, doesn't it, when you put it that way?
It sure does.
I was a big fan of 35 millimeter. I mean, I will give it the digital. The hard drives that come are a million times more convenient than several cans of 35 millimeter film, which you got to put together with tape and scissors for the most part.
Yeah.
It's definitely more convenient. But I'll tell you, the 35 millimeter projector I had was built in 1945, I think, and still worked great. Whereas the new digital projectors need to be replaced almost every 5 to 7 years.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
Computers, man.
Computers. You know who didn't have any computers?
Who?
Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
I sure didn't.
Away we go. And 3, clap.
That was my smooth segue into the second half. Yeah.
That was the smoothest of smooth.
I didn't want to bring everything to a screeching halt.
I'm glad you didn't.
So, yeah,
like a computer would. Yeah.
People won't even notice that we switched over.
Yeah, it's like a 35 millimeter print just caught on fire while we were watching it.
Yeah. Yep. That's funny. That brings us to the movie today that Jason suggested we watch, which is a Disney movie from 1959 called Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Now,
It's more like... Hang on a second. It's more like... Darby O'Gill and the Little People!
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Sean will be providing the Irish translations as we go through this talk.
That's it.
So I was not familiar with the movie. Sean, I think you also were not familiar with the movie.
Knowing that Jason was a musical fan, I was like, hey, man, is there a musical that you know of that maybe we could check out? Because I've been wanting to do one on this podcast. And he was like, what about this Darby O'Gill and the Little People movie with Sean Connery? And so I'm immediately... A musical with Sean Connery? Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, this is a Disney movie? I've never remotely heard of this movie.
Yeah.
And there may be several reasons why. But I enjoyed it. But I am curious, Jason, like, when the hell did this come into your life? Did you watch this as a kid?
I did.
Yeah.
This was on the roll of various VHSs that I had at home of Disney movies.
Was with the porno?
With the porno and Army of Darkness.
And just Darby O'Gill was stuck in there. That's a weird mix.
It tells so much about me, really.
It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth of the matter is, I remembered this as being a lot more musical than it turns out that it was. I guess because I haven't seen it in 25 years.
Yeah.
But for what it's worth, the one song that is in this movie is sung by Sean Connery, which kind of makes it worthwhile, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, it certainly looks, by all accounts, it looks like a musical. It doesn't look like it wouldn't be a musical.
Right?
You send us to like Casablanca or, Citizen Kane. It's like, it looked very colorful. It took me a while, maybe 10 minutes, before I realized, so this isn't really a Sean Connery movie, but that's okay. Sean Connery is not named Darby O'Gill, for instance. That's a little spoiler I'll throw out to our audience. I was expecting a very different story.
Yeah, there's one DVD cover, I think, that is just straight up him and Janet Monroe, who plays the Katie character. And the movie has nothing to do with either of them, really. In a roundabout way.
Yeah, but, somehow Darby is just nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, we got the little people. We got these other folks. Darby O'Gill, not so much.
But so this is, 59. So this predates, this is, if you know your Disney movies at all, it's definitely in the Swiss Family Robinson, Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks. In fact, I think the director, Robert Stevenson, did a couple of those movies himself. He did The Love Bug and the other Herbie movie. It's of that ilk. It is that sort of like family film from that era. Live action, a little bit of cool special effects in there, and this fantasy element. And I don't know, like I found it fascinating to it feels like the most Irish movie I've ever seen in my life. And
Oh, yeah.
like to imagine that Disney was like, you know what, we got to hit that demographic, man. Like we'll take those Irish folktales about leprechauns and turn it into a family classic. And it seems like such a strange recipe now to even think that was possible.
Sure.
You know, a possible mindset. I don't know, Jason, watching it again, what did you think of this movie?
I didn't hate it. I was entertained by it. Did not quite have the same effect that it did when I was a kid, but it was not bad.
Craig, what about you?
It kind of felt like if Disney made a kid's version of a Twilight Zone episode.
Wow. Okay.
That's how I felt through so much of it. Like I felt like it's kind of like, oh, this is kind of fun and kind of funny. But at any second, this will just take a super dark turn. And it did several times, took really dark turns that I kind of felt like the movie didn't necessarily think of it as being that dark. But yeah, I mean, I got to say, man, that was a good watching experience for sure. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I was entertained throughout the whole thing. It definitely was a little different than what I was expecting. I think hands down, you got to take advantage of the luxury of being able to turn the subtitles on when you watch this.
Yeah,
because it's thick. I mean, it's very, very thick, and like just to sort of like get into a little bit of the plot. The Darby O'Gill character is basically I think he was like a 70-year-old man. Like he's playing at least 60 and up, right? This guy who is a caretaker of, this large parcel of land and estate, basically, of some lordship. None of that really matters except for he's not really taking care of the place. He's spending most of his time down in the pub telling stories about leprechauns. And, there's several moments in this movie where I thought, is this whole thing going to end up being a drunken dream that this dude had?
Yeah.
Because, like, everybody, like, nobody... Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. There's a weird dichotomy, even in the first scene of him at the pub, when he's telling the story about what happened when he had the pot of gold, but then the leprechaun, King Brian, the head of the leprechauns, tricked him into making the fourth wish that got rid of it all and will come back into play. But you got, like, 3 young guys who were laughing at the story, and then the rest of the older dudes are, like, immediately on their feet up in those guys' faces. Don't you laugh at this? I was like, wow, they're really protective of Darby O'Gill and his insanity and his alcoholism, Mm-hmm. And, I think later you find, Katie says that he doesn't even drink, but it's still like the whole time, like it has that sort of Wizard of Oz element a little bit where you feel like this might not end up being real. Like none of this might,
right.
But to their credit, I think they play with that really, really well. Even to the extent that Sean Connery, who does not believe any of this, Darby at one point captures King Brian in a bag and is telling Sean Connery, he's like, he's right in there, look inside, And when Sean Connery looks in, he sees a rabbit, But that's because the leprechaun, being a leprechaun, uses his magic to turn into a rabbit. It's a simple thing.
Sure.
But
the movie doesn't really go to pains to really confirm that.
No, yeah.
Not
and
really.
So,
yeah.
No. I mean, that's all on me being like a viewer that's like, can this really be what this is about? Can it really be this
the
thing
dangers
about
of non-alcoholism? Or
yes, and that these little people are indeed real, these leprechauns. But on the whole, I think it's definitely not boring. It doesn't have that sort of languid pace that some of these older movies, specifically I think in this genre, can have at times. And some fantastic effect shots. Mm-hmm. Some really good forced perspective work, and just moments where I'm like, there's an adult male. Again, he might be a little drunk, but he's sitting on the stairs with a leprechaun, and it looks totally real that they're having this conversation, and that one of them is tiny and one of them is not. 1959, man, that's some good work, and it's really effective.
They did a fantastic job, because if they were just green screening it or something, it would be the most obvious thing you've ever seen.
Oh, it'd be terrible, yeah. And it's really like, I think I sent you guys I've found some videos on YouTube where they're talking about the effects of it, and there's just some behind the scenes stuff, and they mentioned how this was also used in Lord of the Rings, and it's totally the exact same thing. And in some cases, this is better, I think, which is crazy to say. But I think some of those effects like hold up in a weird way better than they did in Lord of the Rings because of how much CGI they did to augment some of that stuff.
True.
Jason, I am kind of curious though, like as a kid, I mean, obviously, yeah, you thought maybe there was a little more music involved. Were you charmed by the idea of leprechauns when you watched this? I mean, like, do you remember like that kind of stuff, or like that dance sequence, or them like shooting like lightning bolts out of their whip or whatever the hell it was that King Brian had, his staff or something?
I mean, absolutely. I think as a kid,
Yeah.
you're very charmed by this idea of these magical little beings. And like you said, the movie was very convincing in how it portrayed them up near these regular-sized human beings, and you'd see these fully functional little leprechauns, and you never really questioned that it was real or fake.
Right.
Yeah.
You just kind of experienced it. And so as a kid, I think that was probably one of the biggest pulls of this movie to me.
Do you think kids would buy this movie now?
It's funny you should ask that, because as we're talking right now, my kids are watching it downstairs.
No kidding. Oh,
Yeah.
I can't wait to figure out what they think of whiskey and poteen and
Yeah.
stout and
It's,
all the drink requests they're going to have of you afterwards.
Yeah, it's definitely a bygone age of when it was totally acceptable to show your main Disney characters getting hammered.
Could we have another round? There's nothing stopping us. Good. Oh, I wish all barmaids were like Mary McCluskey. McCluskey? When she served you a drink, why she served you good whiskey.
You are with Darby O'Gill for so much more of this movie than I would have guessed from the setup and from the fact that Darby is played by Albert Sharp, who, guys, I don't know if you looked him up at all.
No.
Any guesses to when he was born?
1809.
Close. 1885.
Oh, my Lord.
Wow.
1885.
I know he was a big actor in the West End and Irish theater circuit, and I know he was in Brigadoon as well.
He wasn't Brigadoon.
Dude.
But oddly enough, he's only on IMDb. They only have him 14 total credits, film and TV. So yeah, it looks like maybe he spent most of his time in the theater. Yeah, I mean, that again is like, I can't imagine any sort of modern version of this, because there's no way they'd let, I mean, how often do you see like family movies where just like the main dude is of that age and kind of, falling down a little bit.
And he's literally the last character you're introduced to in this story. It's almost 20 minutes into the movie before you meet Darby O'Gill, which is crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, again, I can't explain to you the amount of confusion I had about this delightful children's movie where someone's name is Pony, and I don't even know who that is yet. And then Sean Connery's not Darby. And I had to shut it off for a while and sit down and think about it.
Yeah, reconsider your life.
So Sean Connery wanders through the movie generally with a bemused look on his face. This is how I feel like he spent the entire movie until Katie gets sick. He's just sort of,
Crazy old man. Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic teeth, though.
Man, amazing teeth, amazing eyebrows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I heard the reviews were generally not favorable for him. Is that when this came out, like the reviews tended to be like, oh, well, sure, he's handsome, but...
Yeah, this was pre-James Bond Sean Connery.
Oh, yeah.
This was 29-year-old Sean Connery.
Well, in fact, I read somewhere that supposedly... Oh, hell, who's the guy that does that has the whole Bond franchise?
Ian
Broccoli
Fleming?
Fleming, yes. This was one of the movies that helped convince him that Connery could be Bond, I think. Maybe
Really?
partly because of what you're talking a little bit, which is that just that good-natured charm and, some of that stuff. Maybe you see a little bit of that in Bond. How about his acting when he was asleep and the Leprechaun was trying to plant ideas in his head, and he's like halfway sitting up, but his eyes are closed, and he's like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to fall in. I mean, that was amazing. I really did enjoy that scene. That's a weird thing to ask an actor to do. Okay, like, you need to pretend you're asleep, so don't open your eyes. you're going to have this dialogue with a leprechaun, and you can't look at him. So
Especially play the scene as if you're awake, but just keep your eyes closed throughout the entire thing.
Because there's a leprechaun sitting right over there. So yeah, just chill on that. That was crazy. Let's talk, though. We got to talk about the fall down the well into the fairy mountain that Darby takes. There's so much amazing stuff that happens in that. And like, I came away, not even came away, I'm like 5 minutes into that sequence thinking, if you removed this from this movie and showed it to people, you would blow their minds, and they would not know what the hell. I mean, what the hell is going on? I think, but so yeah, Darby at some point goes chasing after his horse up the hill. You know, he has to do rounds at night. That's part of his duties as a caretaker on this piece of land, right? And so there's the famous mountain Naknashiga at the top of the hill where there's ruins, and that's where the leprechauns are. We all know that. He gets up there, and then somebody described to me what happens to that horse.
So what happened to the horse is that it went to a late 70s Black Sabbath concert.
Yes.
It's the only explanation I can come up with. Went all color inverted, and I wasn't sure that there's some tie to that as to the banshee at the end, but I was not 100% sure. What do you think, Jason?
It's not really explained until near the end, but the horse apparently is a puka, which is another Irish kind of trickster spirit that could do either harm or good, and so I guess when he's getting all acid metal-y there in color, I guess that's him shape-shifting into puka form, although albeit not very clearly.
No, but yeah, I think you're right. And I think King Brian had some line about, you know, basically they wanted Darby to fall down the hole. I mean, that's kind of the impression I got. Am I wrong about that? But, you know, they were trying to capture him down there. And then once he's down there, you know, you get some great sequences where, you know, there's a room full of leprechauns, like a cave full of leprechauns, and some very large furniture and swords and things like that, gold. And you got Albert Sharp, Darby O'Gill walking around, and the proportions look right, and it's pretty cool. And then the violin comes out, and Now
I have a question. About this moment.
Okay.
Because I just wonder if it played the same for you as it did for me. Now the Pokemon or whatever knocked him down the well. So the leprechauns, they wanted to trap him. They wanted to trick him into coming. This is like a whole back and forth between Darby and King Brian. They love to just trick each other and trip each other up, apparently. So they've tricked him down into their lair where he will stay forever, apparently, which Darby is not very happy about. Anyway, they give King Brian gives Darby this violin, Stradivarius, a beautiful violin.
Yep.
You know, to try and say, hey, look, things aren't so bad down here. Okay. So then Darby says, maybe he didn't say it, but he plays the fox chase on the violin, to which all of these trickster leprechauns say, well, let's go on a fox chase.
Yeah, that lost me a little bit.
And then there are horses, and they're riding around. Again, another moment where if you pulled this just out of the movie and showed it to somebody, they'd think that they had gone insane. Yeah. Because it's just like Darby's laughing, tiny horses are running around him in a circle, and it all looks amazing, honestly. Like, it really does look amazing to me. But yeah, so that's all happening. The wall of the mountain splits open. They all run out into the darkness to chase a fox because somebody played a song called The Fox Chase. And that's how Darby got out. And that, to me, was the weakest escape of the movie. From there, it honestly got better. Like, yeah. I thought, like, them sort of tricking each other got much more entertaining after that. But that one, I was kind of like, so wait a second. All he has to do is play this song and you guys jump on horses and ride away? Seems like that might be easy. But maybe I read it wrong. Do you guys have a different read on that?
Well, I don't think leprechauns are as clever as they make themselves out to be, for starters. You know, I think they're easily persuaded by a good fiddle tune, obviously.
Well, yeah, clearly.
They like riding their horses.
Yes,
and I don't know. I got lost in there with some of that as well. I mean, it's a really long sequence, and like it's fascinating to watch, though. I mean, it really kind of is. But man, it just goes on and on. It's kind of cuckoo crazy there. I don't know how you read something else unless there's some bit of Irish folktale legend tied to that song that might be knowledgeable among that culture.
Sure.
Otherwise, it was odd. I don't know how the Leprechauns knew that there was a fox anywhere around. I guess maybe they just got inspired by the song as opposed to actually.
That was my feeling. Is if someone plays this song, they all go, "Oh, fox, fox."
Yeah.
Is there a fox? Where's the fox?
Right. They're certainly risking being seen by going out in a large drove on very small horses, I would imagine.
That seems like it would draw attention, as it draws the attention of the poor hapless horse, who, for some reason, for a short time in this movie, the horse, what was the horse's name? Charlotte?
Cleopatra.
No. Cleopatra. Yep, good call.
For a short time, the movie becomes the horse's movie. Like, it felt like we were watching this through the horse's eyes for a while.
Yeah.
And like, even to the point where, and I don't mean to jump ahead, and we can stay where we are necessarily, but the horse, it watches Darby and King Brian.
Yes.
Talk it out a little while later. Lot of looks between him and Darby. And then finally the horse is like, and like lays down and goes to sleep.
Yes.
And the scene like fades out. And I was like, wait, is this the horse's movie now? Like, that was amazing.
I
like,
loved that.
Switch over
Yeah.
to the horse.
I loved that. Yes.
POV horse.
Right.
Well, since the horse is a puka, as we now know.
Is the horse is always a puka?
I don't know.
It wasn't like a puka pretending to be clear. Okay.
I don't know.
I'm not, guys. This is like the inception of Disney movies from the 50s. It's so hard to follow.
Yeah, it's really, really
A lot of
different
layers.
and unique. Here's just a general Leprechaun question for you guys that never dawned on me before I watched this movie. What do they need gold for?
Which ones? Anybody or the Leprechaun?
No, any Leprechaun. What are they doing with what do they do with gold? There's not like an exchange of currency that are they not? They're not buying things,
They don't seem
right?
to need. Yeah, they don't seem to need gold to get anything. They live in a cave.
It seems to me in this movie, the way they paint leprechauns is basically as hoarders and collectors of fine things.
Treasures and
Treasures
artifacts
from all over. Yeah.
And I like that, honestly. And it makes sense because any of the humans they run into, those humans are going to want gold, and it seems to be a good way to buy your way out of something, if nothing else.
Maybe, yeah, I guess so. It certainly sets up some nice tricks to play on.
It does.
Elderly gentlemen.
I mean, you might have something there. It might simply be the carrot that's meant to bait the trap that they so often utilize.
It's kind of interesting, too, because the dynamic between Darby and King Brian, it changes a little bit over time. I mean, there is sort of it's not just that they hate each other. I mean, yes, Darby does threaten to feed King Brian to his cat, Ginger.
It's pretty horrifying.
But there's times where it's sort of like they have each other's back, or like they're friendly among each other, you know? And I liked that. I mean, again, like that's not where I expected that to go.
Well, and that was the thing, yeah. I mean, they definitely trick each other a lot. But when King Brian first brought him down to the cave, he seemed to have fairly, I don't know, pure-ish motives.
Yeah.
Or I thought anyway, like it was not great that he was trapped, but it was something where it's like, I'm basically sheltering you from this,
like leave
your
your
decision you have to make. And it was like, oh, he seems kind of nice. And then, the next thing you know, he's like, oh, I'll feed you to my cat. It's like, what's happening? Like that's really when it started to feel so much to me like a Twilight Zone episode. Like it just felt like this could get a lot darker than it sort of should in a weird way. Like he seems like he's friends with him, and so it took a while for that to kind of bounce back and forth. Where I sort of felt like, oh, they just trick each other. It's all good in the hood.
Well, I love too that like every time they would have like this nice moment together, and then there would be a trick revealed, and like immediately the one would fly off the hand. You murdering son of a! But I'll kill you.
Yeah.
And it's just like threatening the worst things, And it's like, well, 2 seconds ago you guys were like best buds, And I love that. It's like there were so many times where I kept thinking of like Burgess Meredith in Rocky or something, like it's just like Rocky, he's just gonna like chew somebody's head off, but it's a pretty good guy underneath it all.
I definitely felt like there was a mutual respect between the two of them, probably stemming from their constant battle of wits. And I think that was part of the allure of the whole movie, is that there's not a clear-cut bad guy, good guy, really. It's just these two guys that sort of flip-flop depending on what's going on in the B and C story throughout the movie. They bust each other's balls. I mean, they're pretty much every guy friend you ever know.
Yeah, except one is really small.
Let's talk for a second then about that B story. It's hard enough to do believable new romances in a short amount of time when it's the A story. I thought there was some weird stuff in the interactions between Sean Connery and Janet Monroe. And not necessarily from an acting standpoint, but just from a character standpoint. I mean, there's the moment where she finds out that her father has actually, essentially been retired, and the only reason that she didn't know that earlier is because, Darby didn't want to break it to her yet. And so she's furious at Sean Connery for not saying anything and thinks that he's kind of like stepping on their toes there and like kicking them out of their house. But then I don't even really remember how she came back around to being in love with him. Like I just don't. I know they sang a song together, right? I mean, I guess that's enough. That might do it. But
was it just because he was at her bedside after she came to?
No, it was before that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like she brought him lunch while he was singing and reaping one day.
Oh man,
reaping and
but
singing.
Then,
that's a good question.
There were like that. There was that weird moment where she was, or they were gonna kiss, and then like she went for a kiss. I don't know. There was like some, and she's standing there with her eyes closed, and just some of that was like
showed up.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if this is the strength of the movie. Yeah, maybe the Leprechaun stuff really is the gold here. To use their own language. I don't know. Like, I guess you just don't expect that much. I mean, the pony character was sort of like, he's like Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, but with less charm, I guess, or less humor to it. Sure. And I feel like in a way that was a missed opportunity. I would have actually liked a little more of a human antagonist in this thing, I think.
Yeah.
Does that make
but then
sense?
you also had to set up the gratuitous, horrible violence that ends the movie. This delightful children's tale. If he had been laughed at the whole time, it would have just been one punch. So I mean, are we close enough to the end to kind of talk out these last few tricks?
Oh, of course, yeah,
sure.
Because this was, things got real, as they say, towards the end, where Katie is she has the fever that people get in movies where they might not live, whatever the sort of a general fever, and everyone's very worried, and then Darby goes to talk to King Brian. Oh, what happens? And then the death carriage is coming for her. Which is also
the whole suspense of the second act is, when is Darby going to make his third wish? And he's trying to figure out what. He's got 3 wishes. He made one of them, which I don't even remember what the hell it was for. And then he kind of made one. The second, I think, was for Sean Connery to see Brian the Leprechaun, because again, Darby's pride is constantly getting in the way of anything he should be doing, and that's another instance of that. But he is trying to do right by his daughter and figure out a way which she can remain in this town and like in good standing and the best for her. He doesn't want something for himself. He's moved past the point of being selfish. And then what he ultimately does is he wishes that she's going to be okay. because that's when the Banshee starts showing up, and he's seen the Banshee before when his wife died. And so that means death is knocking at Katie's door, and so he wishes that it would take him instead. You get the flying coach of death, which, all that stuff, yeah, it's kind of comical. Again, it's the same sort of Sabbath, somebody licked the electrical outlet effect, here going on with the Banshee and the carriage. But it was pretty creepy. Like, it had a real, seriously, I mean, basically this guy is walking off to his death, willingly to save his daughter. And then when he gets in that carriage, and maybe I'm skipping some steps here, of course, because there's Sean Connery's running around. He makes a fourth wish in Brian's present, and Brian shows up in the carriage. Brian is clearly, leading him to make this fourth wish. And then what we know from before is you wish for 4 things, you don't get any of them. So that takes back everything. That's a really obvious outcome, but one that I felt was satisfying. I don't know.
Yeah,
Did you
too.
guys? Yeah.
I kind of, there was that moment where I kind of saw what was coming, and my first reaction was that I felt like it was kind of a cheat. But then the more I thought about it, no, it actually worked really pretty perfectly.
Yeah.
If you assume that the death carriage is kind of a brainless thing and doesn't know that somebody fell out of the death carriage.
Sure.
So the rules of the death carriage, I'm just saying, are important. Yeah.
I felt like they had earned the sympathy for Darby at this point. I really this is so cheesy, but when his daughter goes and runs to him when he's at the pub and he's getting ready to make his final wish in the presence of all his friends in a bar, of course, and she knocks the bag out of the way because she needs him to take this other thing seriously. Brian, the leprechaun, runs out of the bag as a rabbit and runs off, and it's so stupid. I felt really, really bad for Darby in that moment because, it's like, here he is. He had this entire town, hanging on to him. They had come over to believe that he had the leprechaun. He had done the thing with the shot glass, the shot of whiskey in the bag that was drunk, and then tossed back out. And then as soon as that rabbit comes out, it just completely discredits that whole story. I don't know. I felt sad for the dude. I didn't want him to die.
I mean, that seemed like where his life was supposed to go. And that brings up a sort of a tangent question for me, which is, you have all these leprechauns running around. Nobody wishes for a dentist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something to think about if you ever have those 3 wishes out there, guys.
Yeah. Barker, let's wrap this up. Favorite moment we haven't talked about? Anything else that stands out about this movie, watching it now for the first time in 25 years?
The highlight for me is definitely the cave. The special effects are really pretty incredible. The fact that they use a lot of the same tricks that Lord of the Rings used, forced perspective, and the matte painting, which was absolutely spectacular.
So good, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is really just a lost art, which just doesn't exist anymore, except in digital formats, which pale in comparison when you look at some of these classic old movies and what they were able to accomplish.
I know. And isn't that insane? Because it takes an army of people to make those digital set extensions. And the whole point of those tend to be, just make it look real as possible. And this, no, it's not only just about making it real. It's it makes it beautiful and magical and something, that's not entirely real, and I think it's so much better. Yeah, I'm with you 100% on those matte paintings. Craig, what about you? Anything else?
I don't know. I think I will puzzle over the fox chase scene.
Yeah.
For many a moon.
I would love to find that online, and hopefully, if the whole sequence is contained, I don't know, because Disney is kind of tight on all that stuff, but if it's out there on YouTube or something, we'll definitely put that up, because, it needs to be seen to be believed.
That's it.
I'm going to say I really liked and appreciated by the end of it, and I joked about this being the most Irish movie in the world. It really kind of is, but I think in a way that I like, because it does sort of immerse you in this world. I wrote down, just some of the dialogue and the slang they use, and even just when they're getting drunk with Brian and they're doing basically a limerick contest, and they're rhyming and stuff like that. But there's some great lines, the one I wrote down was, "Your heart's as cold as a wet Christmas." I thought it was fantastic, It's I've never heard anybody say that before in my life, and that's terrific.
They did, yeah. They really did have some good one-liners.
Yeah, there was a couple of those. I gotta say, I looked up some of the slang because there were a couple words. Darby calls the leprechaun a little frainy at one point, and every one that I wrote down that I looked up, I could not find an answer. So I mean, this is like some deep Irish slang, I think, or either they just made it all up. I don't know, but there was something. Yeah, when I'm roaring like Doran's bull, and I was like, I don't know what that means whatsoever. Couldn't find that either. But I will say, like, again, it adds up to the effect of making you feel like this was a movie made, in good faith of this culture. And whether that's true or not, I don't really know. But I thought it was interesting. Also interesting that Walt Disney felt like he had to put up at the beginning of the movie the little prescript that said, "My thanks to King Brian of Knocknashiga and his leprechauns, whose gracious cooperations made this picture possible. Walt Disney." That's such a Disney thing, right?
Well, and I'll throw one last thing in there. You really don't want to miss the fist fight that happens mostly off screen at the end.
Yeah.
The Albert Sharp reaction fist fight.
Yeah.
Those reactions they're almost as good as the Winona Ryder SAG Stranger Things award speech reactions that's going around on the internet right now.
You can definitely mash those up.
You could, yeah.
Maybe we should.
We would be the only people that would ever even think to do that. And so it sounds like we all three would recommend it. I definitely would. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you guys, but it seems that way, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So this is floating around. It's available for rent almost everywhere digitally, and then I'm sure you could find it on DVD and maybe Blu-ray even. I watched it in HD. It looked great. All that stuff holds up. So, Jason, thank you so much for suggesting this and bringing it to our attention.
Well, thank you for having me. I've had a good time.
Last question. 2 questions.
Oh.
Favorite movie theater snack that's not popcorn?
Hot tamales.
Really? Wow.
Absolutely.
Craig?
That's not popcorn.
Jesus, I didn't know this was going to be this big of a decision.
I know. I'll just go with Reese's Pieces.
Oh, you can't go wrong with Reese's Pieces. I got to tip my hat to my wife who turned me into a Snow Caps fan. So and they go really well with the popcorn. So next time, just putting that out there. And Jason, last thing. You work in a movie theater. This is 2017. We're about to get hit by a bunch of new movies. Anything that you're really looking forward to this year?
Sorry. I'm definitely looking forward to Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yeah.
Thor Ragnarok, Star Wars Episode 8.
Mm-hmm.
Florence Foster Jenkins 2.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that one.
Yeah, those are 3 huge movies. I'm sure they will do big business.
Yeah, and I hate to be the guy that throws the 3 obvious choices out there, but I love me some comic book movies. So
there you go.
There you go.
Well, maybe we'll have you back sometime and we'll talk about one. Once again, you can find us online, neverheardpodcast.com. Jason, where can they find your movie theater? What's the website for that?
The Lumina, TheLumina.com.
There you go. If you're ever in Chapel Hill, you got to go check it out.
Right on.
Bye.
Okay.
Was there anything else?